happy to have you here today. Um, and we had a call a few days ago. How this call will go, and yeah, I'm very happy that you're here today, Jacopo. I would like to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself, and then we dive right into your journey.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Ilir. It's a pleasure to be here. So I am Jacopo Tani. I am a co-founder and CEO of Duckietown, which is a company that strives to democratize access to the science and technology of robot autonomy.
We talked a little bit about how these things came together, but yeah, this is a people's podcast. So I'm talking about things that happen behind the scenes of companies, of products, and of innovative technology. And I'm always interested in how this came together, right? So what was in a starting point? What is the background from my guests? And so if you would be so kind, let's go a little bit back and let's start in whatever time you think would be a good starting option. Some people start as early as 6. I wanted to become a robotist when I was 6 years old. I saw Iron Man, but yeah, maybe your story is a little bit different. But yeah, I'm
Well,
very
you can
keen
do
to
that.
hear.
I mean,
Please.
so I guess my story could start from where I'm from. I'm Italian. I'm from Rome. Um, I guess that I didn't really want to be a roboticist. There's lots of things that I ended up doing that I had never thought of until I ended up just about to do them. I guess my passion, when I was a kid, my mother told me I always wanted to be a prince or an astronaut, right? And when I figured out that the prince route wouldn't have worked, and neither the astronaut one, unfortunately, I had to kind of figure it out as I went. I was a big fan of Star Trek growing up. It was one of those things like Star Trek and Mozart basically are the two things that put me at peace with the universe. And so I think that influenced a little bit my upbringing and my way of my professional choices. So I was good at math. I really loved math, thanks to some good great teachers I had in high school, and so I decided to become a space engineer. To follow the technical path, but I was always debating between math and physics and engineering and all those kind of things. I decided to be a space engineer pretty much because it had the name space in it, and I thought it was super cool. I love space so much. I think it's something that has the power of bringing people in this world together, right? It's just much more than just a technical aspect, but it has social implications, basically. And yeah, so I started my studies, and then lots of things happened. I don't know what is the right order. So I guess yeah, maybe the high school part is interesting. There were a few things that happened that shaped my mindset. I think that is something that came very useful for all the study and preparations I did later in life. Had a great math teacher, as I mentioned. The guy was super young, and I remember he had quit the job as a system analyst at Microsoft Europe. At the time, it was a huge thing to be a teacher in high school, like the underpaid Italian high school teacher, like the most noble choices ever. And he was brutal in the sense that he was all about hard work. Didn't matter how smart you thought you were, and he always wanted you to work hard, like really, like just push, push, push. And there I learned the important lesson. Doesn't matter how much like you think you're smart, but you need to accompany you need to work hard. You need to put your, ass. I don't know, can we say bad words in the podcast? You have to sit down on your chair and really put in the time, and put in the patience and understand things and go through them, right? And then I had a great literature teacher, Italian and Latin literature teacher, and she was amazing. She was a well of knowledge. She knew everything. Whatever came to your mind, you asked her, she had an answer. She told you a story. And I remember she really taught me and everybody else in the class at the time the fact that that studying that didn't need to be something you feared. It didn't need to be a job, right? It could be actually beautiful. Like when you study things, there's cool stuff that you learn, and it's amazing. It's enthralling. There's stories of people in the past that did amazing things, and they had all their stuff and all the backs and forth. It was really like, I remember when she started telling stories, and the bell rang, when it was the time to go out. Nobody wanted to go out. Like, I'm not getting out of here until you finish telling the story, I mean, Caesar and stuff or whatnot. And yeah, so I got from her the idea that, there's actually it's actually fun to study. It's actually fun to learn stuff. It doesn't need to be, it's not just for the grades. It's not just because, you need to find a job or somebody told you that that's the right thing to do. Well, feel free to interrupt me at any time, of
Yeah,
course.
yeah. I was just thinking that for you it seems very obvious because you experience it on your own. But I found myself very often in discussions with people who are looking on other people down, like they don't want to work, they don't want to learn, they're lazy, and maybe I have a little bit too much empathy on that. But because when I see you talking, I can see the enthusiasm that you have, and I can see the passion that this math teacher had, or this literature teacher has, was somehow injected into your personality, into your character, right? And here for me, it's very hard to have empathy with these kind of people. So I'm asking you, do you really think if these kids, if these people that television or some newspapers would like us to believe they were born lazy and they don't want to learn and they love to be unemployed, that if they would have had the right parents and if they would have had the right teachers, they showed them how interesting mathematics can be, and biology and chemistry and literature, really showing the beauty in it, and being able to spark this curiosity. How can you not believe that it's all about who are your who are you surrounded with and who are you taught by, right? Why is it so hard to believe? Why is it easier to believe that people are just lazy? So because when you see a sea turtle coming out of the water, when you see some equations being put into visuals, how harmonic they can be, so what's behind some numbers, right? How can you not be fascinated? And you said you were fascinated about space, right? If you have ever been to a planetarium, oh, this is the English word for it, and see this universe around you, and people are trying to tell you how big it is, how can you not be fascinated, right? So I really love your energy. I really love the way you think, and yeah, this is why I'm very happy that you might being able to transport some of your energy and some of your inspiration to people that are listening. At least this is my hope.
Let's see what happens. History will tell. So you said lots of things in that question, which is a great question. But so I'm not sure where to start, but I would start from the laziness part. So everybody's lazy. I am the laziest guy in the world. Okay. So I like to think that, there's one of the most famous equations in history, I guess, or at least one of the most relevant ones, which is F equals ma. No, it's a force equals mass times acceleration, where, I mean, we could do a lesson about it, many lessons about it, but the general idea is like, what's the mass? Now, the mass is kind of like the natural laziness of things, of matter in the world to change their state of motion, right? Like things don't want to change the way they move or whatever, to extrapolate a little bit the way they are, right? Everything that belongs to this world that has a mass different from zero, that is made of atoms and things, opposes resistance to change of motion. Okay, that's a true fact of this universe, or as far as we know, right? And I like to believe that the same applies for humans, right? We all have some sort of mental inertia, whatever. I don't know if there is an equation there, but everybody doesn't want to change the way they think, the way they are, their comfort zone, right? Call it as you wish. And so it's natural. I think everybody is lazy. It's not a matter of people are more or less lazy. I am the king of lazy people. But changing your state is something that happens if you put an F, right? If you apply an external force, and so how to push this analogy? I guess that there is different kinds of motivations for people, right? And later in life, when I started my academic experience, I started being able to articulate this in the fact that there is two major kinds of motivations, right? There is the, like, for students particularly, there is the, for learners, I would say, there is the external motivating factors, which are typically, you do this exam or you do this course because you need the grades to find a job, or because your parents told you so, or because society told you so. It's the right thing to do. It's do your homework, right? Which are real motivations, but maybe not the most, shocking, the strongest ones, right? And there's internal motivations, right? You do things because you think they're good for you, right? They make you interested, they give you joy, they give you peace, they give you something, right? Or just because you have fun. It doesn't need to be necessarily a big thing. I remember I was attracted to math at the very beginning. Math was the whole beginning of my, let's say, journey, so to speak, for a very simple reason, and it had nothing to do with the numbers or whatnot. And it was that in math, you don't need anybody to agree with you. Okay? It's a very important thing. I was always, so I come from Italy. For those who don't know, in Italy, we like to argue a lot. We like to discuss. We like to, back and forth. We always have reasons. Everybody has, but for a child, for a kid growing up, for an adolescent, I don't know. I found myself in a position where I liked to. I didn't like to spend to waste time discussing, going back where no conclusion could be found, no agreement, not necessarily an agreement could be found, right? And math had this special power, which is like we're all under the same boss. Your math teacher doesn't need to agree with you to give you a good grade, to pass you in the exam or the interrogation or whatever. In Italian school, you have these oral questioning. We call them interrogations. I guess it's a bad word in English. But that was what drove me to math at the beginning, right? It's peaceful. Like you go there, you understand it, you do your, everything has to flow, has to make sense, step by step, no jumps, no sensationalisms, and that's it, right? There is true, there is false. Then it depends on many things. As you grow, it becomes more complicated, right? But that was the main, I think, reason. Yeah, and then of course it's beautiful, but beauty is difficult to appreciate in math. I think it comes much later, right? Um, the elegance of math is something that you appreciate only after you've been through lots of good and bad math, right? And so you can tell the difference. Yeah, so I'm not sure if I touched upon all the points of your question. Feel free to remind me if I skipped someone.
No, I think it's totally right. You do need to work your way through, and it is nice to rely on facts, right? Even in today's society where we love to argue, and if you look at the comments in any social media network, you see that people are just love to argue instead of finding the things that are similar or that can connect us. We are so focused on things that are different, and why my opinion is more worth than your opinion. But yeah, maybe we're drifting now too much into a philosophical or ethical or society topic. Let's go back to the
If I
technical
can just
parts.
put in an observation here, if I may interrupt you, sorry about that. I don't want to say that arguing is bad, right? Some degree of arguing is good. It's like a gym of the mind, right? You want to be able to be disagreed with and disagree with people and be able to articulate your thoughts. And somehow math helps to do this as well. It helps you put all the ducks in a row, right? It helps you learn how to think, basically. And I feel that is a really important thing going forward, especially for these newer generations and when AI all over the place, where everything, all this information comes in handy, processed, counter processed, and you're not even sure how. And really the biggest power everybody has and every student should strive to develop as they grow, whatever the path they choose, is to be able to think with your own mind, have what in Italian school they used to call the critical conscience, right? You have to be able to access information and think it yourself. Does it make sense or not, right? Arguing, doing math, they all contribute somewhat to this, I think. It's a gem of the mind.
But thinking yourself, I think yeah, I think even here there's people who would like to argue, right? Think for yourself. I saw a few YouTube videos, and now I know more about the topic than people that studied the entire life. So yeah, but let's continue going further.
High school, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I started then doing, I mean, I signed up to university. I remember going to my hometown's university, La Sapienza University in Rome. I signed up to a bachelor degree in aerospace engineering. I remember, I probably shouldn't say this, but when we did the admission test, there was an admission test to be done, and one of the few mistakes I made was I misspelled airplane in Italian. That's not something I'm proud of, but just to show that yeah, there's always margin for improvement. And yeah, so I cranked through my bachelor degree. The way the Italian system worked was that fundamentally it's time matters more than GPAs, right? Especially at the bachelor level. So I wasn't focused much on, being a straight A student or a 4.0 GPA student, but I'd rather focused on finishing the 3-year program in 3 years, which is an achievement, statistically speaking, on its own. And then I signed up to a master degree in space engineering. In particular, I was into satellites and orbital station, more the construction science side of things, communications, thermodynamics, less on the fluid dynamics things part. And it was great. I loved it. I learned lots of stuff. And I graduated in due time, maximum grades, honors. There's where you actually master degrees are easier than than bachelor degrees, I think, because you know I noticed this thing the first time when I started tutoring. So back to high school, I to earn some pocket money, I started to tutor, basically doing private lessons of math and physics to other high school students or younger kids. And I think it wasn't much for the money, but it was for the, you really understand something when you have to explain it to somebody else, right? Because you really need to make it make sense. And it doesn't, the fact that you know how to make an exam doesn't mean you understand what's going on, right? That's a very
There's a
big.
huge difference, right, in finishing an exam and really being able to teach something. Because when you teach something, there will be some rejections, right? There will be some questions. There will be some questions you haven't thought of yet, right? And if you haven't fully understood the topic in its depth, right, then you cannot answer the question. So it helps you. Tutoring helps you to really getting to the bottom of it and being able to articulate complex topics in easy terms. So yeah, I think for everyone who really would like to get to the bottom of things, teaching the things that you are studying is definitely an accelerator.
100%.
And I think what you said about bachelors and masters, uh, it's because the hard stuff, and especially when you're when you're in STEM, right? The big math modules are coming first, so they're a filter. They really would like to have people really on, because everything, this is the basis, and then everything else is built on that foundation. And if you're unable to understand the foundation, if you're unable to understand the basics, then every further step will become very, very hard. I experienced this myself, struggled a lot with the first few modules, analysis,
Analysis,
and
one and two.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
how it's become.
So the
The
mechanics
nightmare
and
of every junior engineer. Yeah.
yeah, and yeah, I started mechanical engineering and switched to so in Berlin, a Technical University of Berlin, there's actually no aerospace program in the master's yet, but not in the bachelor's. So it's part of a different one, part of a different degree. But yeah, I think the Technical University was very competent in small satellites. I think this was one of the key. Yeah, topics they were very good at. But yeah, let's. You said you finished with honors, but academia is one thing, but getting into business is a totally different thing. And I'm
Oh,
always
yeah.
interested in people who are being able to bring both worlds together. And which is, there's nothing wrong with just in staying in academia, right, or just being in the industry. But the important or the interesting thing, at least for me, is the combination of both, right? Can you make the things useful, or can you apply them to the reality? So maybe you can dive a little bit into that one.
Mhm. Yeah. So the Um, I agree with you. You know, it's always easier to learn complicated stuff if you have a solid foundation rather than, you know, even explaining apparently easy topics to someone that knows nothing, right? It's really challenging. Go try to explain how much is a plus b squared to somebody that doesn't understand the concept of a parameter. It's, how much is a, how much is b? It's like, no, 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 no. A plus b squared is like, it could be any number. Like it's a huge jump in your mind. Right? So how did I get into entrepreneurship or into startups? There's a big jump. So after university, I wasn't lucky. I basically graduated in the midst of a financial crisis in Italy, and so I really wanted to be a space engineer. I didn't want to be an academician. I mean, at the time, I had never thought about taking a PhD. I had never thought about doing anything that would have come later. There wasn't this culture, let's say, in the people I knew or my family or whatnot. And so I graduated during a financial crisis, and basically I was doing I did an internship during my master thesis in a big space company, aerospace company in Italy. And basically, by the time I was finished, I did my degree, there were no positions available. And so I basically was unemployed for a year and a half. It was I remember it as a very sad time. You know, and you think you're super smart. You did your homework. You graduated from the public top university of your country with maximum grade. Now the world I felt like I had done my part, and now the world had to do something. You know, like where's my gold star at the end, right? And the truth is that there are no gold stars, kids listening at home, right? So basically, I didn't know what to do at that time, and I had always very clear in mind what I wanted to do. I knew that I wanted to be a space engineer. I wanted to do this and that. I had like a mission, right? And there it just broke down. And so it was a long time. I think it was a year and a half, maybe longer. And so I decided to keep myself busy, basically keep my mind sharp. And so it was a fun thing. I thought about doing the two most complicated things that could come to my mind at the time, just for the sake of doing the most difficult thing that I could think of. One was doing the board examination of engineering, right? I never really needed it, but it was a very formal exam. And so that I took that out of the way. And then I started learning German. I had no idea that it would have come useful 15 years down the road. But, you know, for Italians, learning German was considered, like, for me, one of those difficult things you could do. So I took a German class. But still, after doing all of that, nothing. I couldn't find jobs. I didn't really have a way forward. And uh, and so I decided that I wanted to complete or at least deepen my space related, let's say, knowledge. So I had a master's and I had in space engineering. So I signed up to another master's. But in this time, everything that is non-technical related to space. There was this beautiful program offered by, it was called the Italian Society for International Organizations. It's basically kind of like the diplomat school of the government or something like that. That was like a short course where they would teach you everything about space, but not related to the math or the physics or the engineering. That's always like, what's the space economy? What's the importance of space for international relationships? How do you organize a space mission? Like the people working in the industry to create a space mission. Like this is where I started kind of being first exposed to notions of entrepreneurship. Like, do you know that to build a satellite, or at least at the time, now I guess things are better, takes a long period of time, and you only have a short launch window. Like you have an appointment. Like if you want to do a mission that goes to do whatever it has to do, like it needs to be launched in that period, right? But there's thousands of people that start working 15 years in advance, and everything has to be done with the precision of a Swiss clock. And it's like, that's a challenge in itself only to make that process work, right? And so I got exposed to all these different aspects of space, all the international law on space. Not everybody knows that there's actually United Nations laws on space, on how to use the moon and other celestial bodies, and all this kind of stuff. It was really nice. And I had an experience at that time that later shaped opened a lot of doors later. And it was I had the opportunity to represent my country, Italy, as a delegate at the United Nations. It was the United Nations Committee for Peaceful Uses of Outer Space. I think it was the 53rd edition or something, plenary session. And I had to actually address the United Nations together with a colleague. We spoke at the United Nations, right? So we had like a 20 minutes thing. And that was the day I lost my fear. I remember walking up to the plenary. So I was in Vienna in Austria. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just about to ask
Yeah,
where was
yeah,
this
I was
speech
in
was
Vienna.
happening?
And the fun thing was that, like I was super scared. I was really worried, like even because I was representing my country, I had to be vetted by the ambassador, by the, head of the Italian Space Agency. It was like you can't just show up and say whatever you want, right? And people who know me that know that I speak a lot, as you might notice, right? I like to speak. And so I remember my responsible at the Italian Space Agency that said, look, I've been doing this for like 20 years and it never happens. But if they ask you a question, please think before you answer. Because if they ask you a question, you can't be vetted in the process, right? You have to just and so what happened is that we did this speech. Everything was this was one of the I was telling you just before this podcast that I never prepare my talks, right? And this was one of the ones I had to prepare because there was no going around it. And everything was really working nicely. And I remember at the end of the thing, are there any questions? The United Nations work is very like, okay, next item on the agenda, order of the day, boom, boom, boom. It's very, very efficient, right? And the vice president of the commission, blah, 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 raises his hand, asks a question, which is like unheard of. Like people don't ask questions. And so he starts asking this question like in Spanish. He was from Chile, I think. And the thing is that the United Nations, we basically have like ear sets with translations, right? And I don't know what was going on, but clearly the translator was not translating in English what the guy was saying because it was like he was really saying a lot of things, and I got like very few words in the ear sets. So I remember at some point I removed my ear sets and I just started listening like this because I don't speak a word of Spanish, but I'm Italian, more or less, 20-30%. You kind of grasp it, the sense of it, right? And so, I mean, long story short, the guy finished this long question, and then the question wasn't really for me; it was for a much more senior person. I was a kid at the time, and this other person decided not to answer for whatever reason. So he looked at me and was like, "What are you gonna do? You're not gonna answer my question?" And so I remember there I had to stand up. I pressed the button, and I had to answer, like just make up an answer to a question I didn't even fully understand. And that was really the moment I lost my fear. Like I cannot be afraid of anything anymore after that thing. I don't know. It was a very formative moment, right? And and yeah, so after this thing, basically nothing really was fun. It was beautiful, but it wasn't really, aligned with my professional career because I was an engineer, right? And so I had the luck of having someone near me give me good advice. And they came to me and they were like, "Hey, have you thought about I know a guy that is the son of the mother of the uncle, whatever it is, that is a professor in America. Why don't you talk to him?" I was like, "Oh, sure, a professor in America. So what, right? That could be anything, eh?" And so after the 10th time this I was told this thing, I checked him up, and this guy was an aerospace engineering professor in a university. He literally from Rome. He was originally from Rome. He graduated the building next to mine. Like, and so I was like, I wrote him an email and I was like, "Hey, this is my situation. It's like this is my CV. Can you just like whatever, tell me what's Go ahead.
I just want to interrupt because we are about to enter the next stage. The next stage, and if you don't mind, because this is very special, I think. If you can go two steps back, and if you would walk us through you said it was a very difficult time because you were unemployed, right? And you did everything that you thought on your own and everyone else was telling you and what was displayed. So these are the steps you need to take if you would like to take on this career. So I really so I think this is actually a very difficult and important time in each and everyone's life, having these kind of situations and how to get out of these situations, right? And you seem very, very energetic, and you said you kept yourself busy. But if you can give one or two sentences, because you were just talking about advice from someone else. Hey, there's this professor in America. Maybe you can give advice to someone who is in a similar situation, who thinks, I don't know, I didn't got the grades that I want, or I wasn't able to finish the degree I wanted to do, and I wasn't unable to get the job position I really dreamed of. So maybe you can give one or two sentences of advice from your own experience going through this emotion again and saying, okay, this is what helped me. I mean, this is very often it's more complex. It's just not one thing, but maybe, yeah, maybe you can say something about it.
I mean, I will preface by saying that, I mean, when I was looking for a job back in the day, the situation is much different now. It's the world has become highly more competitive. So I'm not sure the advice I can give is necessarily, you know, my experience maps one to one with somebody that has this problem today. I would say don't get stuck in one thing, right? So everybody maybe has the passion for space or something you like, or your experiences led you to learn some skills and something, and you know you want to be that thing, right? But don't let that thing constrain you. Let it actually be a direction. Let it be a North Star. The importance is that you just proceed somewhat in the direction of that North Star. It doesn't need to be that precise thing. So be a little open-minded, like wiggle around. Make sure that you don't just follow one road, but you consider your ambition as a direction, and then follow opportunity, especially at the early stage. You know, as you walk through the path, you learn new things and your mind changes and the way you perceive the world changes and you understand things in a different way and more things happen. The more you know, the more you see things in a different way. The more you realize you're ignorant as well. And so the more you want to learn as well, but that's a different story. So I think my one sentence advice is let the thing you want to do be a general direction, not a constraint, a box that you put yourself into. And then just follow opportunity to try to go somewhat and get closer to that direction. As you go, you learn more and doors open. And the
Very
more you
thankful.
study, the luckier you get. Luck is important as well, but
Yeah, you're right. But yeah, thanks for giving this insight because I think it's an important point to share, right? And maybe not everyone, but yeah, anybody who had been in this kind of situation can, I think, relate. And now, when we're looking back at this kind of situation, we think, yeah, I mean, at this time, we really thought this was the world is about to go over, to end, right? But life is going further, and there might be other opportunities. And sometimes you see them, and then you seize them, but sometimes you do need to create them. This is where I think luck comes from trying to create this kind of opportunities, right? I think there's a lot of luck involved. You can push your luck, right? But thanks for going back because this was important for me. Yeah, maybe now we can go back to the road that brings us to America.
yeah, so I ended up talking to this professor, and he was like, "Ah, fantastic, amazing. Thanks to writing me in English. Your CV is amazing. Ah, but I don't have money to hire you." And I was like, "Yes." And so, but he did give me some good advice. He said, "Look," he explained to me how the PhD story worked. And also in America, there's a process. You need to take tests and apply to schools, and you should have, you know, your strategy for applications, top 10, second 10, whatever it is. Now, but I figured out at that time that there was one thing I really disliked. I mean, there's like a voice inside me that I hated at the time the notion of having to demonstrate to someone, in particular the admission committee of whatever school, that I was good. Like, it's like, excuse me, I just got a degree with maximum grades and honor from a country that's been around for a few thousand. Like, it's like, why do I need to go through the process of, and so I didn't do everything he said. I kind of, just because I didn't have anything else to do, I found another person again that helped me in the process, kind of pushed me and insisted. And I applied only to two schools. Like typically people today apply to 20 or whatever. I got rejected by the first one and I got accepted by the other one. And I remember it was I had forgotten even that I had applied after several months. It felt like whatever, 4, 5, 6 months. I woke up a morning, I checked my email, and there was like basically sign here and your life changes, right? And so I remember walking in the other room and I went to my mother. She was kind of like doing the laundry or whatever. I said, "Hey, I'm moving to America," right? And she was like, and that changed pretty much everything. I mean, I started my PhD program at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in upstate New York. And I was super lucky to have some great advisors. I guess I'm not going to do names, otherwise I make injustice to all the other people I didn't name earlier, but I'm happy to add in the descriptions later, all the references if need be. I had some great advisors that really taught me that built me as a professional, right? So at the time, I had no idea what even if I had done industrial internships and stuff, I didn't really know what it meant to be a professional, right? A professional is like not you know stuff and you do your exams, right? But you know you don't know anything and you need to learn how to do stuff, right? Get your ideas to be real things in the real world that work, that somehow in some definition. So I went through the PhD process. I strongly recommend to anyone. I mean, PhD is not for everyone. It's kind of like I've never been in the military, so maybe this analogy is wrong, but I like to think it as kind of like the military service, right? When you join the military, they deconstruct whatever you are and they rebuild you as a soldier, right? The PhD program is kind of like you think you know stuff, well, welcome to the world. You don't know anything. They deconstruct anything you knew before and they teach you how to become a scientist. They rebuild you it's a training to become a scientist, basically, a formal training, right? And I found it extremely enjoyable. I really appreciate it's super hard work. I learned lots of important lessons. No excuses. Don't complain. Man's got to do what he's got to do. If you're not happy, that's the door. You can go away. Like everybody's busy. Like it's a little bit of a you learn that you need to be on the spot, right? And I loved it. I loved it. I learned a lot of stuff. I started doing research. I wrote papers. I got to go around the world and go to scientific conferences and stuff. And it was really, 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 really a formative experience. And after that, I still no idea of doing startups, no idea of doing industry. Sorry if it takes a long time to answer your
Oh,
question.
I love it.
We're nearly there. So at some point, PhD program, when you're a PhD student or a candidate or whatnot, you're a student, right? Like it's just a starting point. It's not an arrival point, right? And so I remember that two things happened, which were really weird. One was, again, this advisor of mine. I owe a lot to this professor. Um, I remember I was about to graduate. It was like the last 2 months. I was finishing my thesis, but the rule is like if you have a paper to publish to present, then they pay you to go to a conference, right? They pay all the travel expenses and whatnot. And now they allow you to travel and to go there. And I didn't have a paper to publish because in that specific time frame, because I was doing my thesis, I was wrapping up. And the guy said, okay, I'll still, I'll still sponsor your trip to, it was an American Control Conference in Chicago. I don't remember the year, I think 2016 or something. And just so that maybe you can connect and find a job, right? And so and before going there, just like the night before, no, actually it was maybe a little bit earlier, but a few months before, I had applied for a postdoc position at MIT. And it was just completely random. I went to academicjobs.com. I found this opening and it seemed like there was my name on it because they wanted someone that was an engineer or a space engineer, knew about basically robotics and during my PhD, I did lots of control systems. I skipped the part where I fell in love with control systems, which is like the thing I teach, the thing I love, specific subject. And so I had applied and I was super passionate about space and I was, very good I had straight A's, whatever. The next day they called me for an interview literally, and I was pretty much hired like after 72 hours. And from an email I sent online, I just stayed like half an hour extra. I wrote a cover letter, sent it. The next day they replied, flew me to Boston, and I got an offer like whatever 2 weeks later. And it was a beautiful thing. But back to the Chicago conference, this professor sends me there. This was still the period where I still hadn't done the interview. I was waiting. I mean, I didn't know if I would have been hired or not. I go to this crazy story. But there is a lesson here. That's cool. That's why I mentioned it. So I go to this conference and I was there whatever, doing everything else but going to talks because I was finishing my PhD thesis. This buddy of mine, a colleague from my lab, has to present the paper, and you support each other. So you go to the conference room. For those who don't know that are listening, conferences are typically places where you go, thousands of people. There's like whatever 10, 15, 20 parallel rooms where certain themes are discussed, and there's presenters that maybe 5, 6, or 7 present their papers in a row. People ask questions with a small audience or whatnot. No, so I go in this room with this where my colleague is giving a talk, and so there's this guy that walks up to the stage just before my colleague, and he puts his presentation up, and he's an Italian guy. Okay, fair enough. And he's from MIT. Okay, fair enough. And you have to understand that everybody, at least the way I understood it at the time, when you're doing a PhD in America, MIT is kind of like number one, right? These are, at least in engineering or whatever, it's perceived as the top of the top. And so you always want to find a way to poke the MIT guys and find that and prove them wrong somehow, right? There's that weird sense of satisfaction if you go against an MIT guy, right? And so I was at this conference at this talk, and this guy, it was like crazy. This is about luck and just the lesson here is put yourself out there, get out of your comfort zone, raise your hand, speak up. Like there's so many things that can happen when you do this. I went there, random. This guy starts his talk, and his talk is about novel image sensors for doing control systems. And they're like, "Hey, we've got this new piece of technology, super cool. We don't know how to use it. I came here to ask you guys that are experts about algorithms and controls. How would you use it?" And it turns out that literally that thing was my PhD thesis. Okay, like it wasn't that exact thing, but I had done a PhD thesis on how to use image sensors in novel ways for robotics for cool stuff. And the PhD is like the constraint. How do you say it? The objective. You get a PhD when the definition is you provide a novel contribution to your field of research. Novel being nobody else ever did it. Okay, it's very important. So by definition, when you defend your PhD for those half an hour that you're standing at the stage or whatever, you are the world's leading expert on that very super specific niche topic because it's novel, right? Otherwise, you don't get a PhD. That's the rule, right? So at that time, I was really sharp on this thing. I wouldn't say the lead, of course, world expert, but I was really knew what I was talking about. So this guy comes up and I can't believe it. So he starts speaking and he says at the very beginning, "No, because we know this thing can't be done." And I raised my hand and I was like, "Excuse me, it's not true. It can't be done." And he's like, and he is like, "Well, what papers? Can you cite the source?" And I'm like, "Sure, there's literature on this." Like, "Which literature?" "My literature," which was my papers that I had published, right? Like, boom, like this. And so we start 20 minutes back and forth going, and it was amazing. And I tell this story just because at the end, I go talk to this guy, and he ended up being one of the co-founders of Duckietown, right? So thanks to him, then I walk away, and he was he is a super smart guy, and he sat me down. He went through all my theses, he went to see all the formulas, everything. He really cared about it. The next day, he sent me additional references and stuff. And I remember he was talking to me, food for thought, stimulating stuff. And I was walking out of the conference, looking at the ground, like this, thinking about what he was telling me. And at some point, he says, "Hi, Emilio." And I raised my eyes and I saw MIT, Emilio. And there's another story here, but basically, he was one of the most famous professors in robotics ever. He's the guy I ended up working together with and one of the board advisors of the startup. So all of this actually started. So basically, in the I remember this guy, the guy of the conference, it was like, "Hi, Emilio, there's this super smart guy that I just met that he's looking for a job," which was not true. I did not tell him that I was looking for a job because I actually had this interview lined up already that I mentioned before. And so I said, "Well, it's not true. I'm not looking for a job. I already have an interview coming up at another department at MIT." He's like, "Which department?" Blah, blah, blah. He's like, "Okay, fantastic. Let them hire you, and then you work for us, so they pay you and you work for us." That was his way. I was like, "Okay, well, let's get hired first, and then we'll see what happens." And I ended up being hired, and I ended up reaching out to them, and I discovered Duckietown. That was where I discovered the thing that then became my the startup, right? Many years later. And so Duckietown started as a class in the computer science and artificial intelligence lab at MIT for the master students there. And it was just a novel way to do education, right? It's not like read the book, do the math, do the exam, which was the standard I had done for all my life, right? But it was like, okay, forget everything. Let's build a fleet of self-driving cars from Amazon components from scratch with all the software, all the hardware, all this, everything. Okay, like from nothing. Like professors and students together, sit down, let's do it. Let's get it done. Like really hands-on learning, super important, right? And it was a really fun experience. And I remember when I was one of the instructors there, and I remember taking the first Duckybot, this little model self-driving cars that then became the flagship products of Duckytown, by bringing it to my office. And at night, I was working on this thing after hours because, of course, I had another job. And I remember it blew my mind. I was already an engineer. I had 2 masters. I had a PhD. I was teaching math and physics since 15 years. I thought I really knew what I was talking about. And this thing blew my mind because I really understood that there's a reason for everything in the real world and things are different than what you expect them. But at the end of the day, it needs to make sense. Like, and everything was spelled out so nicely, and it really you had to make it work, and it either worked or it didn't. It doesn't matter how much what grades you got, right? Either it works or it doesn't in the real world with the laws of physics. And so that was great. And so at that point, I realized, hey, if I had had this thing in my hands back in high school, I would have won 5 Nobel Prizes by now, or whatever, right? There would have been endless opportunities, right? Because I thought I knew stuff, I didn't know anything. That's the bottom line, right? And so I started thinking, but what about everybody else, right? So I come from my background in Rome, blah blah blah. I graduated during financial crisis. Not everybody gets the same opportunities, no, and I really believe that everybody should be given at least equal opportunities, right? And then depending on your hard work and a bunch of other factors, you go where you go, right? And so I said, well, what about we try to bring this experience to everybody around the world, or as many people as we can around the world? And that's where the seed of the startup came up. Let's make this a business, right? And we iterated in many different ways. Like the objective was not let's make a business. It's like we have this cool thing. It's great. It's useful. It's like it delivers value. The key thing of a company. What does a company need? What's the definition? At least my definition of a company. It's whatever, a black box full of different things that happen that you throw humans at it, okay, or a bunch of resources at it, and it creates a value. What is value? It's something that solves a problem for somebody else, for a customer, okay? It's like, so you need to figure out who's your customer, figure out what's their problem, can you deliver them value, right? But I knew that we had something valuable. It's just I didn't know anything else. I didn't know who the customers were. I didn't know what the product was. I didn't know the pricing. I didn't know the marketing. I had nothing. I didn't know anything about company. I never had thought about a company before. For the next 6 years, I continued working at different ways, continuing doing my research on image sensors and this and that and teaching. But at some point, after a couple of years at MIT, where I worked, by the way, on a beautiful project, I wish I had the time to speak about it. I don't know, maybe we can come back to it later.
Second episode.
Okay. I ended up basically this professor that I met at that random conference when I just raised my hand. Imagine if I had never raised my hand there, I had been shy. None of this would have ever happened, right? Don't be shy. Like if you have a doubt, trust yourself that at least 90% of people in the room have that same doubt because if you're there, you're smart. Like whatever you think, imposter syndromes, whatnot. Like if you have something in your mind you don't understand, remember the thing we started from. You need to learn how to think, right? So things like everybody is under the same boss in math, in logic, okay? It's like it's either logical or it's not logical. So if you don't understand something, it's because at some point in the process, it doesn't make sense to you. It doesn't seem logical to you. Raise your hand, ask, you know, and it will be given, right? And somebody will try to explain. And so this professor goes to ETH Zurich, which is a university in Switzerland, in Zurich. It's an engineering school, big school in Europe. And he was a professor at MIT. He moves to become a professor at ETH. Long story, beautiful stories behind that, but another episode. And he asks me to go work with him, basically, to help him run his lab. And that's when I moved back to Europe, where I am now in Switzerland. I worked for 6 years at ETH Zurich, and then last year, basically, I became full-time in Duckietown because it needs it.
I cannot tell you how much I enjoy listening to you. I really love people with energy, and I think you managed to go through the story. And when you go through the story, there's always one thing leads to another thing, right? So my wife always is complaining about my stream of conscious might be a bit weird for some people to follow, but I can follow your thoughts very easily. So I hope everyone else can enjoy this speech as well. I would like to ask you if you could tell us a little bit more about Duckietown. So I think you described it a little bit. You came around from a corner, but maybe you can pitch the idea and the idea behind Duckietown. I think you explained the origins very well, but if I would go on Duckietown on the website, for example, what will wait for me and what can I expect? Maybe you can tell us a little bit about this. And as I know, this is maybe you start with this first.
Sure. I don't want to do the typical pitch, that the elevator pitch that you prepare. I want to try to get a little bit I mean, really to the substance of it. It's a set of tools, hardware, software, mitigational materials, whatever it is, set of technical tools that streamlines, makes it relatively easy as it can be. Learning and teaching, most importantly, anything related to robot autonomy. Autonomy being the key word. Okay, when we started, robotics was a thing, autonomy was another thing. And still today, people are getting more used to the autonomy word, right? It's like, how do you get machines to take decisions on their own to achieve a task, a non-trivial task in a certain environment? Okay. And so we have developed through the years a number of resources that our main customers, let's say the main people the company makes sells to, are professors, are higher education professors. Okay, so and we give them the tools to replicate or to improve upon the experience that we had at the beginning through this sandbox, basically, this robotics sandbox, right? That hides somehow all the nitty-gritty details boring about robotics, but makes it easier to focus on what's new and what's great, and which is AI, right? It's the software architectures that allow robots, whether it's a self-driving car or drone or smart city. We have different, let's say, shapes and forms of robots. How do they take decisions, and how do they interact with each other, and what are the pros and what are the cons of different approaches, and how do you play, let's remove this part and that part, and let's do a little surgery to the brain of a robot and understand how things work, right? And yeah, so this is fundamentally what we do. And then of course we have many users. So in our case, it's not maybe the same for all companies, but customers and users might be two different set of people, right? So our users are the students, the learners, right? And our customers are the professors, the educators, right? And we have released in 2019, I think, self-driving cars with Duckietown, which was I know at least one professor that would disagree with me, but you're gonna interview him next. Was and is the world's first massive open online course in robot autonomy with hardware, right? So anybody today from home, it's free, it's online, and you can go do it now. You can sign up and you can go through, let's say, a teaser of Duckietown, the first 13 weeks of content, where we guide you step by step into, building your first agents, understanding what is a robot, up to having a self-driving car that you can buy a kit and you can build it in your living room or office or dorm or whatever it is, have like driving autonomously in a mock urban environment, which is the proper Duckietown. And yeah, so we have thousands and thousands of users learners that we try to give the resources for free. And then we have, I think now it's 262 universities around the world, that in 68 countries last time I checked, that use Duckietown to teach, to do research, to do outreach. And so I could speak forever and ever about each application and how Duckietown serves them. But yeah, to summarize, it's a set of tools that streamlines the creation, the delivery, and the consumption of robot autonomy learning experiences that are hands-on, are fun, are MIT grade, it's good stuff. And everybody has the opportunity to do it. That was the thing, right? Everybody has the opportunity. We really do this because we want to give the next generation the opportunities that I didn't have. I had a ducky butt in my hands for the first time after having a PhD, after during my postdoc. Okay, so it's like way down the road. Too old now to do anything useful already. Your mind is already set, right? And now anybody can do this virtually for free. We try to keep the price point as much as possible down for the hardware side.
There's a few projects at the moment that are really pushing open source robotics, right? 2 episodes, I think. Yeah, I think for 2 episodes earlier, I was talking to Remy, and he initiated the Le Robot initiative at Hugging Face, and you see printable 3D printable parts for robotics and cheap options to really train your robot, smaller robot arms. And yeah, there's a few initiatives that are concentrating and focus on this. Duckietown is the first, not the first, I'm not 100% sure about this, but belongs among the first that really is pushing it on a wider scope. And the numbers you just shared with us, I think, is a statue for that, really showing that this has been achieved on a larger scale. And you got me even more passionate about the project now. As you said, the main reason behind that is, yeah, creating opportunities, right? There's, as you said earlier, when you have the opportunities, there's still hard work involved, right? So it doesn't mean equally everyone has the same, but at least the starting point should be within reach, right? You have parents that are teaching their kids good, that are showing and sparking the curiosity, and they have an advantage that they don't start at zero versus other kids where parents are working the entire time or have not the mindset to bring you to the interesting and important parts in life. So this goes very close to my to things that are important for me. So I hope I can give other people with this interview, with this episode, insight in such a beautiful project, right? And I would love to understand from a commercial point of view, because I'm not working as an engineer in our robotics. I work as on the commercial side, on the scaling growth growth part of making a company profitable and bringing sales and marketing together and service and support. Maybe you can give one or two sentences about where the journey of Duckietown will go to. Maybe you have something you can share.
Definitely, it's challenging to scale a company, right? And the business model is something that needs to make sense from a number of points of view. I'm not sure how to summarize this in a few phrases. One thing I can say is, well, so to answer your question directly, doing a hardware business is tough from a financial perspective, because hardware with respect to software is very challenging and capital intensive to and costly to manufacture, to deploy, to ship, to store, compliance, batteries, customs, fees. It's like there's the sales cycles. So like the time, the delta time, the difference in time from when you put the money in, you make the investment to manufacture the stuff, and when you get paid eventually by the customer, can be 6 to 9 months. Okay, it's like a huge amount of time to get money. So cash for a startup is the most precious thing in the world, right? It's like $1 in the bank is worth $1,000 of virtual, because it's really precious. And so having to park this money into something that you don't even know exactly when and how you're going to sell, and then especially when you deal with companies or universities, typically institutional customers, the payment is not upfront, it's after some time. You know better than I how it works. So there's intensive challenges in getting all of that done. But so what's the way forward? The way forward is trying to add to a hardware revenue source, a software and a service-based one, right? So there's actually a big conversation going on in the investors in the robotics, let's say, industry, about what's the perfect ratio between revenue sources of hardware, software, and service, right? And if there's some statistics, you can see some historical data. It's an interesting dive from a sales and marketing perspective. But to make the company, the business sustainable, you need to have some software and service component of your revenue streams, because those are easier to handle, okay, or easier to manage. One time we did a mistake. It's like there was a problem in one of the details of a USB port of one of the boards in the robots manufacturing. They used a thermal paste that wasn't exactly a soldering paste that didn't support the right temperature. It's like a real detail. And 30% of this board failed. Like, bam, like it's basically you burned a production round, right? And how do you fix it? New production round, reship things to all over the world to the people. It's like it's intense. Imagine making a bug in a software. Like, how do you fix it? Click, done, right? You push the product. I mean, I'm making it easier. So a little more complicated than that, but you can do often on the air fixes, right? So there's an evident difference. So what we started doing roughly last year was introducing first the service component, because you have to go back at the end of the day to what's the company about, right? It's not about selling robots. It's not about selling the Duckybot. That's I would argue a distinguishing factor. How do you call it with our competitors, right? Duckietown is not about selling hardware. Duckietown is about providing learning experiences, right? That are top class, top notch, world level, accessible, right? Like the kids that go to MIT, right? Like the kids that go to ETH and do robotics, right? And so what is the value that you really bring to your customers, which is the professors, right? And if you think about it deeply, you understand that professors are competent people, right? It's not like building a Duckybot is something that they don't know how to do, right? That's not the value that you're bringing. The Duckybots are actually relatively simple robots. They were designed to be minimal autonomy platform. What's the simplest possible thing you can do that you can still write scientific papers with, right? So that's kind of the exercise that we did to come up with the design of the first Duckybot. But the real value you're bringing to professors, which are our customers, is making them save time. Because like ask any professor, what would you like? 28-hour long days, right? It's like time is tyrant. Nobody has time, right? Number two is having a joyful experience, like not having the stress. Professors typically deal with 52 different threads of stuff in parallel, and they want to avoid stress. Everybody wants to avoid stress, but especially if you're hyper busy, super, productive person, which you need to be if you're a professor, you want to minimize stress. And stress comes from uncertainty, okay? Like when you don't know what's going to happen, you stress yourself. I can put the stamp on it, right? So Duckytown minimizes stress. So we created a set of services that we add to the hardware and to the other resources and to the software and to the pedagogical curriculum, the lessons, the classes, the exercise, whatever, you name it, the evaluation infrastructure. We offer basically a priority support service, and we offer other elements that make professors save more time and reduce uncertainty in providing classes. And that's really valuable to them. So they're willing to pay the extra premium. And that's since, and we don't, so another challenge that is a tough one is for a robotics company is to generate predictable revenue. No, so especially investors, they want predictable revenue. Like you need to know how much are you going to make next month to pay the salaries or whatnot to the servers.
Yeah, definitely.
Right? And hardware doesn't really provide that, right? Because you know how many. If I tell you all the history of the last 6 years, every month how much robots I sold, that doesn't inform me of how many robots I will sell next month, right? I mean, maybe some of the classes are going to buy some extra, but you don't have a contract, right? You don't have a subscription. You don't have a fee, right? And so we sell these services as a subscription. So we sell it as a subscription, but it's not really a subscription because we're lucky. We are in the education business basically, and the periodicity, the subscription kind of comes as part of the deal. It's in the nature of the business. Professors need to teach a class every year, right? It's not like they sign a subscription contract to make them want to every year. If they like the platform, then they'll continue buying the service, right? So that's one component. And then we're working to introduce now some software revenue source. And there's different ways we're thinking about doing it. And history will tell.
Um, yeah, I'm very curious to see what comes out of it, especially as there is the difficulties with hardware and software, right? And this sort of company that you're having, and I was lucky that you took the time with me. I was lucky that you walked us through the journey. I do have to admit that I was not really aware of this company before. So a friend of mine who we talked about just shortly. he was one of my guests in one of the former podcasts, actually on two episodes. And Akshat, he was the one who said you should talk to Jacopo. He's very interesting. The companies, it's definitely something that you should have a look at. And yeah, I was very happy and fortunate that you took the time out of your schedule. And it took a while back and forth to get together, but thanks for your patience. And yeah, I wish you a lot of success with the company, right? And I hope that we will have the opportunity to have a second episode to see where the company comes to, and yeah, maybe even more interesting and insightful stories that you're sharing with us.
It was my pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me, and I look forward to the next opportunity.
Okay, then take care and talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye bye.